Hi, I wanted to work with you today on looking at some more aspects of argument and specifically concession because I think it is a really strong tool on building your argument and particularly dealing with opposing viewpoints. So we're going to look at the Tollman model of argument as one particular kind of modern type of argument structure, and then also we're going to look more specifically at concession. So I just want to review the essay prompt. Some of you in your skeletons have not been actually addressing the prompt itself. You've been talking around the prompt, so I just want to make sure that you are dealing with the prompt. The other thing I did see is sometimes your thesis might include Coates' view of the dream, but then your topic sentences are dealing with Richard Benjamin's video or Mr. Head's video. Those can be explanations and or evidence in your body paragraphs, but if you don't bring them up in the introduction to your essay, then it seems sort of disjointed from your thesis about Coates. Okay, so what is the Tollman model of argument? Here is Tollman. He's a British philosopher. He created this in the 50s and 60s, and basically before this we just had Aristotle's view of argument, which was very almost like math, where you might have seen these kinds of syllogisms like if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. And so they would have you kind of work through those to make an argument. And those are really not very user-friendly for English and for talking about issues of people and humanity. They're a little more kind of connected to math. So Tollman came up with this really good way of arguing, and it contains 6 steps. The first 3 are really important for the writing of an argument, but all 6 are important for analysis. They're not a listed steps that you use in the argument, but they're all part of the argument. So we'll go through each of them. So the 6 steps or the 6 parts are the claim, the position that you're arguing for, okay? And we're going to talk about different kinds of claims, but you are making a claim whether or not you believe in or agree with Coates' view of the dream. Now you may agree with parts of it, but not all of it. You may acknowledge parts of what he says, but then disagree, or you may fully disagree. Then the second part is the grounds. These are the reasons for the supporting evidence that bolster the claim. So this is your evidence. On what grounds are you saying that the dream is not like Coates says? Or on what grounds are you saying that he is right or that you agree? Or on what grounds are you concerned about his view? Okay. Next is the warrant. The warrant is the chain of reasoning. It's sort of often unstated. We'll get into it a little bit, but it kind of connects the evidence, the grounds to the claim. Backing is sort of where is that extra justification, the reasons to back up the warrant. So what other proof do you have? And we'll give examples of that, but what other backing or support is there? The rebuttal or reservation, these are exceptions. So you might agree or disagree with the claim, but also include exceptions or counterexamples. And finally, a qualification. These are limits to the claim if you want to have them, or the warrant or the backing. Ways in which you say, well, yes, but. And so I'll show you sort of how to do that. So first of all, the claim itself. There's 3 types. There's a claim of policy, where there's normally a should or ought sort of statement, and then there's a claim of value, where it's comparison. Something is better or worse, more effective, less effective than something else. And then there's a claim of fact, where something is stated really assertively that it sounds like a fact, but it actually could be argued, okay? Politicians use that one a lot, but I think, and you might be using this as well, but you might also include the value. Most of you are going to probably use a value or fact claim for this essay on Coates' dream. Idea of the dream. Okay, so things about claims. They need to be really clear and specific to be convincing. So like I gave 3 examples here of claims, and clearly the last one, and you want to think about this, is much more effective as a claim. I'm not saying whether you agree or disagree with it, but that it's much more effective because it's specific and it has sort of a clear scope. And so I think you can see the more specific you are, the easier it could be to make sure your audience understands where you're coming from and what your claim includes. All right, so the grounds. This is the evidence that supports the claim. There's three types. There's examples, which could be real or imaginary. Imaginary sounds funny, but it's sort of like when you are using a hypothetical in order to be convincing. So you might say, well, if this were your daughter, how would you feel? Or something like that, where you try to get someone to imagine themselves in the situation. And that's what I mean by imagined. It could be a real example that happened to you. So for instance, in this essay, perhaps your family came here from a country where there's an oppressive regime. You might be saying, well, I understand Coates' concerns. However, look at how much more of an opportunity I have here than he is, kind of discussing, or he's limiting his view in some way. The second kind of evidence is testimony. So this is going to be experts or eyewitnesses. So the experts could be Coates as far as his personal experience and sort of the historical research he's included. But the testimony might also be of different famous people who have been interviewed, economists, sociologists, professors, things of that nature, or eyewitnesses to something. And then finally, statistics. These are quantifiable, again, open to interpretation, but quantifiable pieces of evidence that you can use to make your argument or your claim. So there's two ways to put those together. Maybe you make the claim first and then use the evidence, and then sometimes people use the evidence first and then make their proposal. Normally that's only when they don't feel like their audience would really agree with them, and so they might use an inductive approach to kind of hook the audience, to get them to think like them, and then to bring in the claim that they're wanting to use. Most of you are going to be using deductive reasoning for your evidence and putting it after your main point in your topic sentence. Okay, what's the warrant? This one sounds funny, but the warrant is normally unstated, and I best can show it to you through example. So for instance, I'm giving the case because this is a really common argument or claim. Needle exchange programs, I'm not sure if you know what those are, but basically when communities are trying to get rid of heroin drug use in particular, or needle drug use, one of the reasons they try to help is there's a lot of deaths that occur from needle drug infection and sharing needles. And this is normally among the homeless population and among drug users. And so one of the community efforts is to do a needle exchange program, and so getting people to exchange their needles for clean ones. So even though they're still using, they might not contract things like HIV and spread it, or have, it's like a kind of a community health concern. So, but people sometimes say, look, needle exchange programs should be abolished because they cause more people to do drugs. It's a similar argument to in high school should not provide condoms because they're encouraging kids to have sex. I mean, there's similar sort of arguments there. The unstated warrant with this claim is that when you make risky behavior safer on some level, not getting HIV, you encourage more people to do it. And so that one, especially for the needle program, is a little complicated, because are you encouraging people to continue drug use if they're not getting HIV? Is it better to kind of keep the cases of HIV not spreading? So you get the idea that what's unstated, the reasoning behind it, is really kind of the engine behind the argument itself. What's promoting this argument? Like if I said, teenagers should watch only X amount of TV or be on their phones a certain amount of hours per day, I would be assuming then, or making the warrant, that teenagers are misusing their time, and that's what's impacting their grades. Okay, so you got to think what's really behind the argument. Okay, and so that's what we want to look at that warrant sometimes. Okay, so backing. Who's got your back? Types of backing. More recent evidence. So maybe there's a proposal out there or a claim, and you're saying, oh, but there's more recent evidence. Oh, over here the backing's good because in this study there were a larger pool of subjects. Maybe the opposition has a lack of credibility. Maybe someone has a better education or background than someone else. Perhaps there is something that's being left out of the argument. Someone is omitting something that's really key to whether to help you make or not make your decision. And then also there could be logical fallacies. These are pieces of logic, connections, assumptions we make without strong evidence and connection. So a famous one is ad hominem. If you watched the debates last night, you saw a lot of it on both sides. It's to the man is what it means in Latin. It's when you attack the character over the policy, and somehow the character then is supposed to be relative to the way decision making could be made. A famous example of this from years past would be when George W. Bush had a DUI. He was running for the second time, and it came out that he had had a DUI and he'd never told his children, his daughters. And so this was one time where Democrats like went crazy and they got upset and about that, and it ended up being kind of not a good way for them to argue. There's a lot of other things they could have argued about that they did not agree with regarding George W. Bush or his background or his qualifications, but getting kind of personal about that part seemed maybe a little ineffective. It was attacking the person and not how that person would hold office. Secondly, the other example is either or. Either or is when, and I'll use George W. Bush again as an example, but when you create a statement where you only give two options, either you're for us or against us, which was what George Bush had said when during the war. You're either for the war or you're against the U.S. And so what that denies, it's a logical fallacy because it denies that people could be for the U.S. and against the war. It denies like a lot of other options. And so we want to avoid those, but also point them out in our opposing, people we're opposing. Okay, so I'm going to show you, there's three here of different kinds of counter arguments. That's the general umbrella. One of those I'm going to show you is concession, okay? And you can read through these three as an option as well for your paper. But concession is important. Concession means to give away. And like you might think of a concession stand, they don't give this stuff away, but like sporting events, you go there to get something. This offers sort of a merit to the opposition's point of view. You concede that they have a point on some level. Now, you don't give up your most important point, but you concede something they have done well or right, and it increases your credibility with a wide. Okay, sorry about that. So when you get to the dependent clause, remember that the concession comes first, okay? And that you can put the thing you want to concede but not mainly argue at the beginning of the sentence, and your main argument comes at the second part. So some examples here. While Coates' view of the American dream is understandable concerning his upbringing, so you're conceding like you understand why he believes that. Many immigrants sacrificed a great deal to come to this country because it offers more opportunity. By putting that second, you are showing that you get it, but that you're going to argue something different. You're going to argue a different point of view. Similarly, if you say, well, some may feel that Coates' view of the American dream is overly pessimistic and limiting, so you're acknowledging that some people may disagree with Coates. Then you say his view of America is purposely uncomfortable, as it is an accurate depiction of what it feels like to be black in America. And then you're going to argue sort of what that perspective is and why it's legitimate. Okay? So hopefully that helps you kind of think about how you're going to structure your thesis and some of your topic sentences. I want to give you also some transition phrases because this is going to help you with kind of having a flow to your argument and looking at both sides. So you may say, it is true that, or certainly, or admittedly, or of course, or obviously, or sure. You acknowledge something that Coates feels this way, or that immigrants feel that way. However, you bring in the contrasting view and you kind of discuss it, and then you say as a result or therefore, and then you explain why it has merit. Okay, so those three steps, you can interchange any of these, but you'll see that the first column is the acknowledgement. The second column, that's where you get to your contrast. And then the last column is where you get to your result or your the validity of your argument. Okay, so these are good transitional phrases that you can use when you're arguing against an opposition. Okay, so hopefully that helped. Sorry for the little hiccup in the video here. If you have other questions, please let me know. I'm here to help you and make your argument work. And I look forward to working with you on the next unit. Thanks.